May this be the day we come together. Mourning we come to mend, withered we come to weather, torn we come to tend, battered we come to better. Tethered by this year of yearning, we are learning that though we weren't ready for this, we have been readied by it. We steadily vow that no matter how we are weighed down, we must always pave a way forward. This hope is our door, our portal. Even if we never get back to normal, someday we can venture beyond it, to leave the known and take the first steps. So let us not return to what was normal, but reach toward what is next. What was cursed, we will cure. What was plagued, we will prove pure. Where we tend to argue, we will try to agree. Those fortunes we forswore, now the future we foresee. Where we weren't aware, we're now awake. Those moments we missed are now these moments we make, the moments we meet. And our hearts, once all together beaten, now all together beat. Come, look up with kindness yet, for even solace can be sourced from sorrow. We remember not just for the sake of yesterday, but to take on tomorrow. We heed this old spirit in a new day's lyric. In our hearts, we hear it for Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne. Be bold, saying time this year. Be bold, saying time, for when you honor yesterday, tomorrow ye will find. Know what we fought need not be forgot, nor for none. It defines us, binds us as one. Come over, join this day just begun. For wherever we come together, we will forever overcome.
Good afternoon. Today we're gathered in our advisory groups watching the live stream of our annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. I apologize that we weren't able to do this last week on the national holiday, but as you might be aware, I was down and out with COVID. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Can and Ms. Yeager for allowing us to hold our program this week, now that I'm back and healthy. You just watched Amanda Gorman's latest poem, New Day's Lyric. She asks of us, of all humanity, that we come together, whether we're mourning, withered, torn, battered, or tethered by the events that are unfolding across our world and our nation. That no matter what, we must always pave a way forward. Gorman goes on to speak of kindness and finding solace of all of our yesterdays and all of the tomorrows we are bound to face. We've all been taught that Dr. King Jr. was the face of the civil rights movement, the one who peacefully took to the streets to end segregation in our country. Our nation recognizes him as a peaceful protester who said no to violence. However, peaceful doesn't necessarily mean quiet. Yes, Dr. King didn't promote violence, fighting, or looting in the streets, but he was relentless in his ways. The world might remember him as a peacekeeper, but what he was doing and fighting for was radical. Radical in a way that shook much of our country, and radical in a way that is still seen threatening today. Dr. King challenged policies and systems that were embedded into the fabric of our country. He and those alongside him worked hard to unweave what was so tightly woven into our society. Dr. King made people uncomfortable, not because he was violent, but because the country knew he was right. The country knew it was time to change, but they were unwilling to budge. And while many people stood with him and agreed with him, there also were many who didn't. Most likely, those same people who won't stand with us today. To many of us, the civil rights era is just something that we've learned about but haven't experienced firsthand. But think for a moment of all the people in your life. I guarantee you know somebody who has experienced it firsthand. The world just mourned the passing of our dear Betty White, who was 99 years old when she died. Dr. King would have celebrated only his 93rd birthday had his life not been prematurely taken from him. We know Betty White in color, yet we only know Dr. King and the civil rights movement in black and white photographs, which lends itself to allow us to believe that it's only a thing of the past that was so long ago, and the problems then don't exist now. However, Betty was older than Dr. King, and yet we have photos of her from her early acting days in color, and very few photos of color of Dr. King. Is this intentional? Ask yourself, where does this systemic power come into play here? Coming up, you'll hear from your peers and students about ways in which Dr. King's dream is manifesting itself into their lives, albeit very differently for each person. Take time to listen carefully and reflect inwardly on their words and what's already been shared with you today. Afterwards, you'll have time to debrief and discuss with your advisors, given a discussion guide. Can you truly pick up what each person is putting down? And with that, I'll turn it over to some of our members of our Students of Color group. Thank you.
May this be the day we come together. If only it were to be that simple. However, it is easier said than done. There's the saying that sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. Yes, it indeed becomes difficult to break a bundle of sticks altogether, but the challenging task is to remain as a group when someone or something tries to break you. Unity is key to human growth. It is the oneness among people from different backgrounds. By being united in a group, we learn to appreciate and respect one another. We must not break anyone's trust. At times, it becomes tempting to go behind someone's back for a greater opportunity for ourselves. One moment, you can be cheering them on loud and proud at one of their games, and then the next, you could be screaming a racial slur in a song. Losing someone's trust is a greater loss that cannot be filled up with any opportunity we may have obtained. There are always external forces present that will try to tear a group down, that will try to rip us in shreds. There will be times when obstacles will present themselves that seem impossible to conquer. During these times, leaving your friends is not the solution to the problem. It is important to not let individuality get the best of us and get in the way of being united. Once a bond has been formed between a group of people, no matter the class, race, or difference, they will stand by you through anything that may come. So the next time you say you support your friend, but then go on to betray them by saying things that are offensive and go against who they are, think about the damage you have caused, not only to them, but to the greater group. Unity can only be achieved when an individual is ready to sacrifice their individual interests and work for the betterment of the human population. So maybe today may not be the day we come together, but today can be the next step in achieving unity amongst us all. Thank you.
Today, on the 24th of January, we commend the man that changed the lives for Black people forever. A man that in December of 1955 led the Montgomery bus boycott, a movement in which his home was bombed. His life was threatened, and he was arrested as a result of. Exactly 385 days later, since the beginning of the boycott, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled segregation on public buses unconstitutional. On August 28, 1963, he, along with names such as John Lewis and James Farmer, led the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, a political rally that had over 250,000 participants present. This march, where he would deliver his most notable speech, "I Have a Dream," would be the stepping stone to the adoption of the Civil Rights Act. A man that on October 14, 1964, received the Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest recipient of the award at the time. He was and is a symbol for a promised future in the lives of African Americans. We commend Martin Luther King Jr. for being the beginning of the dream. But King's greatest accomplishments was not in the rallies and movements he led or the eloquent speeches he produced, nor was it in the awards he received. It was his ability to love, despite the hatred that encumbered him in all aspects of life. Martin Luther King did not conform to the ways of his enemies, but embodied the spirit of grace and love, which we remember him for today. Today, I implore all of you to match a crude tongue with a graceful smile, a hateful attack with a calm reproach, and then you will see how fast evil will be extinguished, how you will create a completely uninhabitable environment for hatred to thrive. I tell you today that it is not a weakness to not succumb and be enraged by others. King himself said, "Let no man pull you so low as to hate him." As is King's legacy, let it be in the history books that we are remembered as a generation that did not yield to the wickedness of this world, that did not emulate the callous behaviors of our adversaries, but instead was emboldened to do the rare thing, to love. I will leave you with one last remark from MLK about love. Love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the heartbeat of the moral cosmos. He who loves is a participant in the being of God. Thank you.
Hello, Suffield. Today we will be performing a poem about critical race theory. But what is CRT, critical race theory? It is not a diversity and inclusion training, but a practice of interrogating the role of race and racism in society. Kimberly Crenshaw, the woman who coined the term CRT, notes that it is not a noun, but a verb. It cannot be confined to a static and narrow definition, but is an evolving practice. It critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetuates a racial caste system that degrades people of color to the bottom tiers. CRT also recognizes that race intersects with other identities, including sexuality, gender identity, and others. CRT recognizes the racism is not a former relic of the past. Instead, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on Black Americans and other people continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. So, when you hear this poem, I urge you to think about how MLK would feel about CRT. Would he just be passive about the education of Black history, like the United States has been? I'll be
#SchoolProud when they
#Teach the Truth by Chastity Blair.
They say #Teach the Truth. Don't indoctrinate our youth when the truth has yet to have been taught.
The treacherous theys are the uneducated educators of the United States.
Don't teach them what to think. It's your extinct way of viewing the world.
Don't guide them out of the dark and grimy walls of ignorance. Black people probably conversate about how all white people are evil at their conferences.
Most don't understand the freedom wave we've been riding. Our diaspora yearning from acknowledgement, yet them teaching our rights is a controversial academic movement. Kimberly Crenshaw cultivating for them to teach those in the legal field. Nevertheless, in the legal field, it is sealed.
For them, teaching Black history is too much mental gymnastics, yet they do aerials over our lynching epidemics while exemplifying the white power tactics, ignoring the Black Panther basics and Ruby Bridges logistics. But the youthful Black bodies must accept these facts before they were 7, susceptible to slip into a deep depression. We do stand the landing for one nation, indivisible with justice for all. America will never gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars in the spangled heaven. The education system is laced with generational disgrace, just as the USSR beat the US in the space race. Unlike America, education is Germany's ace.
They do declare the education of the horrors of the Holocaust mandatory. Do analyze virtual documentaries, photos, and videos. Do follow the honorable shadows. through the ghastly, ghostly gallows. Do understand why Hail Hitler never echoes. Do contextualize compositions of the vast ethnic hate follows. Do identify these atrocities against the minorities to make sure they are embargoed.
If education is the great equalizer, why don't some American teachers want to uphold the equilibrium of Black history for all men? Who doesn't want to emancipate the youth into the glorious light of truth? One could only imagine it is those who purposely don't want to empathize but willing to capitalize off our bodies and continuously dehumanize. German students have the right idea to sympathize. They want to meet the Holocaust survivors, to memorialize.
Public institutions, public education. Urban becomes synonymous with marginalized. Public schools become synonymous with the ticket to prison. How can we reform the policies that cycle each season?
C.
Critical
R.
race.
T.
Theory. C.
Call for the masses to learn the correct history.
R.
Raise the right questions and be direct with the delivery.
C.
Touch the forgotten and whitewashed territory. C.
Careful of the white primary.
R.
Right the wrong teachers of antiquity.
T.
Tear the passive roots of American anatomy. C.
Captivate the theory and let it be no mystery.
R.
Real generational shifts will be legendary. T. Till we're taught the critical race theory.
Celebrated on the third Monday of each January, Martin Luther King Day commemorates the life and struggles of the civil rights activist and leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Institutional racism was a major issue in the U.S. during the time of King's life, so he spent his entire adulthood promoting peaceful protests to the discrimination and injustices of the world. Anybody could imagine just how much fear he himself and his followers must have felt walking down the streets, knowing they could lose their lives at any moment, and risking their lives in the hopes that future generations of people of color would be free from the hate and resentment they felt in every environment they came across. Dr. Martin Luther King's work and aspirations completely embodied this school year's theme of hope. The way he followed his ambitions and desires to keep fighting for what he thought was right for the world have helped not only myself, but other students of color express themselves in any way they can make themselves heard. He gave us hope. As a student athlete, hope is what fuels me. I remember one day, a couple years ago, my dad, coach, and I were talking about my baseball career and how as a Hispanic, I had to work twice as hard as others simply because of my last name and heritage. Just like many other students of color who have been told the same thing, being told that we must work twice as hard as our white peers can be discouraging, but I use this reality to push me forward. I have not stopped working on my craft in the hopes that soon I will be able to make it to the MLB, and this is what MLK wanted. He wanted people of color to feel that their dreams can turn into changeable goals. He wanted us to have the luxury of pursuing our deepest passions, wanted those like him to be able to live freely and do whatever the white man could do without any consequences. For centuries, the world has deemed being a person of color as a burden, but I choose to see it as a part of myself I hold proud in and own with confidence. Thank you.
Martin Luther King Jr., a man with a dream that could be achieved. He had hoped that the colored boys, girls, and adults alike could go into society without being judged by their skin, but by their character. He had a dream. Now, this dream, while achievable, is still far from it. Throughout my time in high school, I've seen how hateful students and adults could be, different maturity levels, but still similar mindsets. People who I thought were friends, even roommates. However, I don't want past experiences to control me or anyone else's thoughts. I'm a senior now, which means I have to go off to college soon. Different environment, new people, unique mindsets. It is scary, but at the same time exciting. When I get out there, I don't want people to see me as the black boy who can swim or the black boy who can act, because whoever heard of that? But no, I want them to see me as Tyler, the young adult that is coming into his own. The young adult that can spread MLK's message. On the stage, I can show anyone, not just black, men or women, that you can be confident in who you are. On the stage, we can spread awareness, get our voices out there, and let people know that what's going on in our world and what needs to be changed. Not everyone will agree with me, but this is how I want to spend my time advertising Mr. King's message. Thank you.
When the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, whoa. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Every day, women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtapositioning us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa out on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it goes down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, whoa. Glory. Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, and we'll fight on to the finish. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh, ooh. We'll cry glory, oh glory, oh, ooh. Summer is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They marched with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, whose power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. Coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen his glory. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, whoa. Glory, oh, glory. Hey, hey. When the war is won, when it's all said and done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, glory.
Often, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is just seen as a day off. Aside from what may seem to be known, we're still detached from his impact. Not only is the country dealing with an ongoing health crisis, keeping the majority of people at home, we also enter the new year on the heels of an intense mourning for racial justice. While MLK Day is talked about as a national day of service, often it stops as just that, merely talk. While we celebrate Dr. MLK, we should be taking steps into supporting your local peers and community directly. Being a meaningful ally to any community means constantly critiquing your allyship. Martin Luther King Jr. Day should be a day when we look at the entire scope of the racial justice movement, past, present, and future. Notice where you could be doing more, and do it. And always remember, your job is to support, not overtake. Today shouldn't be seen as a time to reflect on the history of racial injustice in the past, because racial injustice is definitely not something entirely in the past. Your proof is in the necessity of movements like Black Lives Matter, working to challenge racism in all forms, from everyday microaggressions to deep systemic violence that are sinking in on our society. Today, we heard from our peers about the importance of unity and brokenness, taking a stand, loving one another, finding hope and having pride in ourselves despite what society deems us, teaching and learning the hard truths of our country and dreaming about our one days. Because of Dr. King and the many other men and women who led the civil rights era, we are able to stand beside you, cheer for you, and learn with you. But how are the collective we doing all of this for others? It's easy to sit alongside people you know, people you grow up with, or people you go to school with. But how do you demonstrate your true allyship? How are we demonstrating our support of one another in our communities? As I stated earlier, MLK Day is historically a day of service to help those in our communities, to be an ally or an upstander. The conversation's ongoing. This work is not yet finished. While we may not be engaging in the service to the greater community this year, I encourage each of us to start right here on our campus. Respectfully engage in challenging conversations with your peers. Seek guidance of trusted adults to help you. Dr. King.